ever told yourself that you'd say no this time, but somehow you end up saying yes again? Setting boundaries is one thing, but communicating boundaries is when things get real. This is ADHD a podcast where we talk about everyday life and ADHD. I'm your host, Dr. J. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with those with ADHD. Today, we're talking about ADHD and communicating boundaries. I'll explain why communicating boundaries is tricky for women with ADHD, and I'll share some communication styles that can make boundary setting a bit easier to do. So why is it hard to actually communicate boundaries? Let me explain. Number one is executive functioning and the boundary breakdown. Executive functioning is a set of mental skills like working memory, inhibition, planning, and flexible thinking that help you manage yourself and your life. Unsurprisingly, ADHD impairs these abilities. When it comes to boundaries, executive dysfunction might look like forgetting to follow through on saying no, not realizing until too late that your limit was crossed, being unable to organize your thoughts in the moment to express what you need, or trouble anticipating future emotional outcomes. And what I mean by that is saying yes now and not remembering that you're probably going to regret it later. Research shows that individuals with ADHD often have difficulties with self-regulation and delay aversion, which can lead them to choose immediate comfort. So, for example, avoiding conflict by saying yes over long-term well-being. Number two is rejection sensitivity and people-pleasing. So let's talk about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, which is not in the DSM, but it is widely discussed. RSD is when people experience extreme emotional pain in response to perceived or real rejection and criticism. And for many people with ADHD, it's not just a buzzword. It's a lived experience. This intense fear of being disliked can push people with ADHD to override their own needs to preserve the peace or maintain connection. So instead of saying things like, I'm not comfortable with that, they might say something more along the lines of, it's fine, I'll make it work. Because the pain of rejection, even the possibility of it, is way worse than being overextended for a woman with ADHD. Women with ADHD in particular often grow up trying to mask their symptoms to fit into neurotypical molds. This constant camouflage can erode self-trust and increase shame, making it harder to assert themselves. Number three is emotional dysregulation makes boundaries feel risky. Communicating boundaries involves being vulnerable, and vulnerability comes with emotional risk. For people with ADHD who often struggle with emotional regulation, even small interpersonal stressors can feel overwhelming. Some research has found that individuals with ADHD experience stronger emotional reactions and slower recovery from emotional events. So the mere idea of someone reacting negatively to a boundary can lead to anxiety or shutdown. And because ADHD often includes difficulties with impulse control, these emotional reactions can snowball before the person has a chance to pause and assess what they actually need. Number four is low self-esteem undermines self-advocacy. Years of being told that you're too much, too sensitive, not trying enough, or always messing things up can really start to take a toll. People with ADHD are at a higher risk of low self-esteem and internalized criticism. And if you don't feel worthy of having your needs met, then you're less likely to express them. This can look like apologizing for having needs at all, dismissing your feelings as not a big deal, or waiting for other people to notice that something is wrong instead of just saying it. Low self-worth often shows up as silence, and that silence erodes relationships from the inside out. Number five is social skills and processing speed differences. ADHD also affects how quickly someone can process social cues and formulate responses. In heated or high-stakes conversations, this lag can mean that people with ADHD freeze or fumble, later thinking of what they should have said hours afterward. There's also research suggesting that individuals with ADHD may have difficulty in pragmatic language use, meaning the social rules of communication and expression. That can make articulating boundaries tricky, especially when they have to be done in a nuanced or emotionally charged way. Instead of being direct, folks may default to vagueness, passive communication, or indirect hints, none of which will get their needs met clearly. Communicating boundaries isn't just about finding the courage. It's also about finding the right communication style that works for the situation. Understand that the style may not match who you naturally are. For example, if you're a person who would prefer to avoid conflict, welcome to the club, but that's a necessary aspect of life. Avoiding strategies that allow you to appropriately engage in conflict simply means you're gonna have a worse time overall. I'm going to walk you through 4 broad strategies on what to do interpersonally. The first is direct communication. This is essentially say what you mean clearly and concisely without over-explaining. It's helpful for women with ADHD because it keeps things simple and reduces emotional spiraling. So, for example, you might say something like, "I'm not available this weekend," or "Unfortunately, I have to decline because I'm busy." I can feel your guts twisting in knots as I speak about this, and I can hear the echo of what if this or what if that? I'm going to be very direct with you. Getting out of the habit of hemming and hawing over things, being passive or passive aggressive is necessary if you're going to be an effective communicator. You will lose or damage otherwise healthy relationships if you don't practice interpersonal effectiveness. Practice speaking plainly to people, which certainly does not mean being rude. The second is delayed communication. Give yourself time to process before responding. This helps with impulsivity, emotional regulation, and decision fatigue. So, for example, you can ask things like, "Can I get back to you?" Or "Let me check my calendar and let you know." As I mentioned earlier, so much of the trouble that gets brewing for people with ADHD is responding too quickly. It's important to learn to give yourself breathing space. Even delaying an answer for as little as 5 minutes can give you enough time to consider some of the factors in saying yes or no to something. The third is scripted responses. You want to have go-to phrases or templates ready. This will help to reduce stress in the moment. And you can use a notes app to jot down your responses to common scenarios that you find yourself in. So, for example, "I'm at capacity right now, so I'll have to pass," or "That doesn't work for me, but thank you for asking." If you're a person whose mind goes blank, gets flustered, or even gets distracted within conversations, especially emotionally intense ones, scripted responses are the bee's knees. And lastly is written communication. You want to use text, emails, or even visuals to express boundaries. This allows time to reflect, organize thoughts, and communicate without emotional overwhelm. For example, you can send a text like, "Just a heads up, I'm offline after 6 p.m. for my own mental reset." Now that I've told you what to do, let's get into how to actually do that, because feelings are real and they do show up when you're trying to communicate with people. You may need to build emotion regulation skills first. ADHD is associated with greater emotional lability and reduced prefrontal control. Some of the ways that you can help yourself with this is practicing DBT skills like opposite action and self-soothing, and also using mindfulness-based interventions to ground yourself before boundary setting conversations. Mindfulness and DBT reduce emotional dysregulation in adults with ADHD, which does improve interpersonal effectiveness. Number 2 is to rehearse with a safe person. People with ADHD may feel unsure how a boundary will land and fear rejection. Behavioral rehearsal enhances social and communication skills in ADHD and helps prepare for real-world conversations. Rehearsing reduces uncertainty and builds confidence. Number 3 is to use self-compassion to manage guilt or shame. People with ADHD often feel guilty for saying no, which is rooted in low self-esteem and internalized criticism. So after setting a boundary, remind yourself, my needs matter. Saying no doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Number 4 is to start small and celebrate boundary wins. The ADHD brain thrives on dopamine, and incremental progress with positive feedback boosts motivation and learning. Strategies to use here are to start by saying no to low stakes requests and to reflect on what went well afterward and reward yourself. That's it for this episode of ADHD And. If you loved today's episode, be sure to check out our episode on ADHD and setting boundaries, where I explain how ADHD makes setting boundaries challenging for women. If this episode hit home, share it with a friend who's learning how to speak up for themselves. And if you've got a go-to boundary phrase that works for your ADHD brain, tell me about it in the comments.